Welcome back to Matilda, everyone. Now, today's chapter is it's not as long as the one was the other day, but it is quite long, so we'll get started. So here are the list of the chapters, and yesterday we read the one called Throwing the Hammer. Today I did say it was a good chapter. It's called Bruce Bogtrotter and the Cake, and it is a good chapter. So should we get started? Bruce Bogtrotter and the Cake. Now I haven't put any pictures on because I don't want to ruin it because it really is good. "How can she get away with it?" Lavender said to Matilda. "Surely the children go home and tell their mothers and fathers. I know my father would raise a terrific stink if I told him the headmistress had grabbed me by the hair and slung me over the playground fence." "No, he wouldn't," Matilda said, "and I'll tell you why. He simply wouldn't believe you." "Of course he would." "He wouldn't," Matilda said, "and the reason is obvious. Your story sounds too ridiculous to believe. And that's what the Trunchbull's great secret." "What is?" Lavender asked. Matilda said, "Never doing anything by halves. If you want to get away with it, be outrageous. Go the whole hog. Make sure everything you do is so completely crazy it's unbelievable. No parent is going to believe the pigtail story. Not in a million years. My wouldn't. They call me a liar." "In that case," Lavender said, "Amanda's mother isn't going to cut off her pigtails." "No, she isn't," Matilda said. "Amanda will do it herself. You see if she doesn't." "Do you think she's mad?" Lavender asked. "Who?" "The Trunchbull. No, I don't think she's mad," Matilda said, "but she's very dangerous. Being in this school is like being in a cage of cobras. You have to be very fast on your feet." They got another example of how dangerous the headmistress could be on the very next day. During lunch, an announcement was made that the whole school should go into the assembly hall and be seated as soon as the meal was over. There were 250 or so boys and girls were settled down in the assembly, and the Trunchbull marched onto the platform. None of the other teachers came in with her. She was carrying her riding crop in her right hand. She stood up there on the centre stage in her green breeches and with her legs apart and her riding crop in her hand, glaring at the sea of upturned faces before her. "What's going to happen?" Lavender whispered. "I don't know," Matilda whispered back. The whole school waited for what was coming next. "Bruce Bogtrotter!" the Trunchbull barked suddenly. "Where is Bruce Bogtrotter?" The hand shot up amongst the seated children. "Come up here!" the Trunchbull shouted. "And look smart about it," which means hurry up. The 11-year-old boy, who was decidedly large and round, stood up and waddled briskly forward. He climbed up onto the platform. "Stand over there," the Trunchbull ordered, pointing. The boy stood on one side. He looked nervous. He knew very well he wasn't up there to be presented with a prize. He was watching the headmistress with an extremely wary eye, and he kept edging farther and farther away from her. With little shuffles of his feet, rather as a rat might edge away from a terrier that is watching it from across the room. His plump, flabby face had turned grey with fearful apprehension, which means he's really scared. His stockings hung around his ankles. "This clot!" boomed the headmistress, pointing the riding crop at the little rapier. "This blackhead, this foul catabungle, this poisonous pustule you see before you is none other than a disgusting criminal. I can't say that word. Descendant of the underworld, a member of the mafia." "Who, me?" Bruce Bogtrotter said, looking genuinely puzzled. "A thief," the Trunchbull screamed. "A crook, a pirate, a brigand, and a rustler." "Steady on," said the boy. "I mean, dash it all." The headmistress. "You deny it, you miserable little gumboil? Do you plead not guilty?" "I don't know what you're talking about," the boy said, even more puzzled than ever. "I'll tell you what I'm talking about, you suppressing little blister. the Trunchbull shouted. "Yesterday morning during break you sneaked out like a serpent into the kitchen and stole a slice of my private chocolate cake in my tea tray. The tray had just been prepared for me personally by the cook. It was my morning snack, and as for the cake, it was my own private stock. That was not a boy cake. You think for 1 minute I'm going to eat the filth I give you? That cake was made from real butter and real cream. And he, that robber bandit, the safe cracker, the highwayman standing over there with his socks around his ankles, stole it and ate it." "I never did," the boy exclaimed, turning from grey to white. "Don't lie to me, Bogtrotter," barked the Trunchbull. "The cook saw you, and what's more, she saw you eating it." The Trunchbull paused to wipe a fleck of froth from her lips. When she spoke again, her voice was suddenly softer and quieter and more friendly. She leaned towards the boy, smiling. "You like my very special chocolate cake, don't you, Bogtrotter? It's rich and delicious, isn't it, Bogtrotter?" "Very good," the boy mumbled. These words were out before he could stop himself. So by doing that, when he agrees with her, saying yes, it's very good. He doesn't say the word yes, but he says very good. He's actually admitting that he has taken it. "You're right," the Trunchbull said. "It's very good. Therefore, I think you should congratulate the cook. When a gentleman has a particularly good meal, Bogtrotter, he always sends his compliments to the chef. You didn't know that, did you, Bogtrotter? But those who inhabit the criminal world are noted for their good manners." The boy remained silent. "Cook!" the Trunchbull shouted, turning her head towards the door. "Come here, cook. Bogtrotter wishes to tell you how good your chocolate cake is." The cook, a tall, shriveled female, looked as though all of her body juices had been dried out of her long ago in a hot oven. She walked out to the platform wearing a dirty white apron. Her entrance had clearly been arranged beforehand by the headmistress. "Now then, tell Bogtrotter," the Trunchbull said. "Tell the cook what you think of her chocolate cake." "Very good," the boy mumbled. You see, he was now beginning to wonder what this war was leading to. So again, because he said very good, he has admitted that he's taken it. And remember, it was her very own private stash. It wasn't what the other children had. The only thing he knew for certain was that the law forbade the Trunchbull to hit him with the riding crop that she kept smacking against her thigh. That was some comfort, but not because the Trunchbull was totally unpredictable. One never knew what she was going to do next. So I think that's the most scary thing about her for the children, is that she is, and there's one word, excellent word to describe it, unpredictable. So they don't know what she's going to do. She's hitting the riding crop against her thigh, but the children know that she can't hit them with it, but they don't know what she's going to do. So the fact that she's unpredictable, that kind of scares them. "There you are, cook," Trunchbull cried. "Bogtrotter likes your cake. He adores your cake. Do you have any more left you would give him?" So she wants to give him some cake now. This is a bit confusing. That would be something you would do which is nice. But let's see if she actually is nice, or maybe she's playing a trick on him. "I do indeed," the cook said. She seemed to have learnt her lines by heart. "Then go and get it, and bring a knife to cut it with." The cook disappeared. Almost at once she was back again, staggering under the weight of the enormous round chocolate cake on a china platter. The cake was fully 18 inches in diameter. It was covered with dark chocolate brown icing. "Put it on the table," the Trunchbull said. So this cake, it was a massive cake. It's probably about this big. It's it's a chocolate cake, and it's got dark brown chocolate icing. So a little bit of chocolate cake with chocolate icing would be nice, but I don't think I could eat a really big slice of it. It would get a bit sickly. It'd get a bit too sugary after a little while. There was a small table in the centre of the stage with a chair behind it. The cook placed the cake carefully on the table. "Sit down, Bogtrotter," the Trunchbull said. "Sit there." The boy moved cautiously to the table and sat down. He stared at the gigantic cake. "There you go, Bogtrotter," Trunchbull said. Once again, her voice seemed very soft and persuasive, so she's quite clever because she's trying to make her voice sound like, "Oh, yeah, it's okay, here you go, here's some cake." And her voice was even gentle. "It's all for you, every bit of it. As you enjoyed it so much as that slice you had yesterday, so very much, I ordered Cook to bake an extra large one, all for yourself." "Well, thank you," the boy said, totally bemused. So he's quite confused on why she would do that. "Thank Cook, not me," Trunchbull said. "Thank you, Cook," the boy said. The cook stood there like a shriveled bootlace, tight-lipped, implacable, disapproving. She looked as though her mouth was full of lemon juice. "Come on, then," Trunchbull said. "Why don't you cut yourself a nice thick slice and try it?" "What now?" the boy said, curious. He knew there was a catch in this somewhere, but he wasn't sure where. "Can I take it home instead?" he asked. So the little boy, he says, he knew there was a catch in it somewhere. So he's wondering, why is she being so nice? Why is the Trunchbull ordered me this cake? It's a really delicious cake. Why is she being nice? He knows there's a catch, but he doesn't know what. And then he's asked the question, could I take it home instead? Let's see what she says. "That would be impolite," the Trunchbull said with a crafty grin. "You must show Cookie here," which is like Cook, "what grateful you are and the trouble she's taken." The boy didn't move. "Go on then, get on with it," the Trunchbull said. "Cut a slice and taste it. We haven't got all day." So she's trying to encourage him to cut a slice of cake to eat it. So that also doesn't sound that bad. But we know this Trunchbull. There's something more to come. The boy picked up the knife and he was about to cut the cake when he stopped. He stared at the cake. Then he looked up at Trunchbull. Then the tall, stringy cook with her lemon juice mouth. All the children in the hall were watching tensely, waiting for something to happen. They felt certain it must. The Trunchbull was not a person to give someone a whole chocolate cake to eat just out of kindness. So not only does the boy know, but everyone else knows that she wouldn't normally do that. So there must be something more going on. Many were guessing that it had been filled with pepper or castor oil or some other foul-tasting substance that would make the boy violently sick. It might even be arsenic, which is poison, and we would be dead in 10 seconds flat. Or perhaps it was booby-trapped cake, and the whole thing would blow up in a moment it was cut. Taking Bruce Bognor with it, no one in the school put it past Trunchbull to do any of those things. "I don't want to eat it," the boy said. "Taste it, you little brat," the Trunchbull said. "You're insulting the cook." So now everyone's thinking, "Oh, what's happened? Why is she being so nice?" Very gingerly, the boy began to cut a thin slice of the vast cake. He levered the slice out. Then he put the knife down and took out the sticky thing in his fingers and started very slowly to eat it. "It's good, isn't it?" the Trunchbull said. "Very good," the boy said, chewing and swallowing. He had finished the slice. "Have another," the Trunchbull said. "That's enough, thank you," the boy murmured. "I said have another," the Trunchbull said. And now there was an altogether sharper edge on her voice. "Eat another slice. Do as you're told." "I don't want another slice," the boy said. Suddenly the Trunchbull exploded. "Eat!" she shouted, banging her thigh with her riding crop, shouting, "If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake. You stole cake. Now you've got the cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You're not going to leave this platform, and no one leaves the hall until you have eaten the entire cake. That is sitting there in front of you. Do I make myself clear, Bogtrotter? Do you get my meaning?" So suddenly her plan has become clear, that she wants him to eat the whole cake in one sitting. If you have a look at the picture, so obviously Trunchbull is very big, but have a look at this boy, and they say that he is quite a big boy, but look at the size of the cake and him. The cake is enormous compared to him. Like I said, I might be able to eat one slice of chocolate cake covered in chocolate icing, but I would struggle to eat any more, and he has to eat a whole cake. Ooh, he might pop. The boy looked down at Trunchbull, then looked down at the enormous cake. "Eat, eat, eat!" Trunchbull was yelling. Very slowly the boy began cutting himself another slice and began to eat it. Matilda was fascinated. "Do you think he can do it?" she whispered to Lavender. "No," said Lavender, whispered back. "It's impossible. He'd be sick before he was halfway through." The boy kept going, and when he'd finished the second slice, he looked at the Trunchbull, hesitating. "Eat!" she shouted. "Greedy little thieves who like to eat cake must have their cake. Eat faster, boy, eat faster. You don't want to be here all day, and don't stop like you're doing now. Next time you stop before it's finished, you'll be straight in the chokey, and I shall lock the door and throw the key down the well." The boy cut the third slice and started to eat it. He finished this one quicker than the other two, and when he had done, immediately picked up the knife and cut the next slice. In some peculiar way, he seemed to be taking it into his stride. Matilda watched very closely and saw no signs of distress in the boy yet. If anything, he seemed to be gathering confidence as he went along. "He's doing well," she whispered to Lavender. "He'll be sick soon," Lavender whispered back. "He's going to be horrid." When Bruce Bogner had eaten his way through half of the entire enormous cake, he paused just for a couple of seconds and took several deep breaths. The Trunchbull stood with her hands on her hips, glaring at him. "Get on with it," he shouted. "Eat it up." Suddenly the boy let out a gigantic belch which rolled under the assembly hall like thunder. Many of the audience began to giggle. "Silence!" shouted Trunchbull. The boy went on cutting himself another thick slice and started eating it fast. There were still no signs of flagging or giving up. He certainly didn't look as though he was about to stop and cry out, "I can't eat any more. I'm going to be sick." He was still in the running. Now a subtle change was coming over the 250 watching children in the audience. Early on they'd sensed an impending disaster. They had prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy, stuffed to the gills with chocolate cake, would have to surrender and beg for mercy, and then would have watched the triumphant Trunchbull forcing more and more and still more cake into the mouth of the gasping boy. Not a bit of it. Bruce Bogner was 3/4 of the way through and still going strong. One sensed that he was almost beginning to enjoy himself. He had a mountain to climb, and he was doing jolly well to reach the top or die in an attempt. What's more, he'd now become very conscious of his audience and how they were silently rooting for him, which means they're silently cheering for him. There was nothing less than a battle between him and the mighty Trunchbull. Suddenly someone shouted, "Come on, Brucey, you can make it!" The Trunchbull wheeled round and yelled, "Silence!" The audience watched intently. They were thoroughly caught up in the contest. They were longing to start cheering, but they didn't dare. "I think he's going to make it," Matilda whispered. "I think so too," Lavender whispered back. "I wouldn't believe anyone in the world could they eat a whole chocolate cake of that size." "The Trunchbull doesn't believe it either," Matilda whispered. "Look at her. She's turning redder and redder. She's going to kill him if he wins." The boy was slowing down now. There was no doubt about that. But he kept pushing the stuff into his mouth and dodging, and with the dogged perseverance of a long-distance runner who had sighted the finish line and knows that he must keep going. So what that means is they're comparing him to someone who runs a long way by saying that it's as if when you run a really, really, really long way and you can see the finish line, it makes you want to carry on. It makes you keep going. So that's what they're saying. It's like he's sighted the finish line and he knows he must keep going. So he can see the finish line, which is the end of the cake, and it's made him determined to finish. As the very last mouthful disappeared, a tremendous cheers rose up from the audience, and the children were leaping on their chairs and yelling and clapping and shouting, "Well done, Brucey! Good for you! Good for you, Brucey! You've won a gold medal, Brucey!" Now, have a look at Brucey now. Brucey looks really, really stuffed. But more importantly, have a look at the Trunchbull's face. She is fuming, isn't she? The Trunchbull stood motionless on the platform. Her great horsey face had turned the colour of molten lava, which means really red, and her eyes were glistening with fury. Oh, that's a lovely description. So that you can really tell, even though the picture's black and white, that her face is excellent. Her face had turned the colour of molten lava, which, like I said, is really red, and her eyes were glistening with fury. So her eyes were glistening with rage. It really does give you a really good picture of what she would look like. She glared at Bruce Bogtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge overstuffed grub, repentantly commorse and unable to move or speak. A fine sweat was beading on his forehead, but there was no grin of triumph on his face. Suddenly the Trunchbull lunged forward and grabbed the large empty china platter on which the cake had rested. She raised it high in the air and brought it down with a crash right on top of Bruce Bogtrotter's head, and the pieces fell all over the platform. The boy was now so full of cake that it was like a sackful of wet cement, and you couldn't have hurt him with a sledgehammer. He simply shook his head a few times and went on grinning. "Go to blazes!" screamed Trunchbull, and she marched off the platform, followed closely by the cook. Now that's the end of our chapter today. So she wanted to teach Bruce Bogtrotter a lesson, but actually, do you think she has taught him a lesson? Maybe you could write in the comments, what do you think? And if she has taught him a lesson, then what she taught him. And if she hasn't taught him a lesson, well, what do you think she's gonna? Do you think she's gonna finish it there, or do you think she's gonna do something else? Well done. It was another long chapter today, so well done everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow with another good chapter. Bye.